The Ready, Set, Grow podcast is sponsored by Ag Expert, software designed for Canadian agriculture. Visit them today at agexpert.ca.
Welcome to the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. My name is Michael, your host from RH Accelerator. On the Ready, Set, Grow podcast, we like to showcase startup and early stage companies, as well as visit with innovators in the agriculture and food industry. Today, we're here with Joe Dales, co-founder at RH Accelerator, and Jeffrey Coull, head of strategic initiatives and projects at the Weston Family Foundation. Jeffrey, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Michael. It's a great pleasure.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at the Weston Family Foundation?
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in innovation and specifically in neuroscience of all things. But at the Weston Family Foundation, I have a relatively broad portfolio as head of strategic initiatives and projects. I guess my role can best be defined as including undertakings of the foundation that fall outside of the scope of its normal philanthropic activities.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So for those that aren't familiar with the Weston Family Foundation, can you give us a little bit of an overview and its connection to the food industry? I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, gladly. So the Weston Family Foundation, which is based here in Toronto, is one of the largest private foundations in Canada. It was formerly known as the W. Garfield Weston Foundation and has been around for about 60 years at this point. The foundation supports initiatives really that increase the well-being of Canadians. We have a laser-like focus on Canadians from coast to coast. And particular emphasis is placed on initiatives that foster learning and innovation. If I can be a little bit more specific, we have a thematic focus on healthy aging on one hand and healthy ecosystems on another hand. So these are our core foci as an organization. In the healthy aging sphere, we support advanced research in both neuroscience, which again is really my background, as well as research looking at the human microbiome, which is that constellation of bacteria that lives inside all of us, and where learning is increasingly involved in health and disease. Then on the ecosystem side, we are a very significant player in supporting environmental stewardship, conservation, and we also are one of the largest funders of research and science in Canada's north, in the Arctic and beyond. So those are our core foci. As I said, we also undertake projects here and there that don't fit into those pillars. And of course, the largest of which is the Homegrown Innovation Challenge, which I'm involved with here at the foundation.
So the Weston family are connected with Loblaws in the food industry. I think that would be of interest to our audience. Can you talk a little bit about some of the history there?
Yeah, absolutely. This goes back several generations, and the Weston family really got into the bread and the bakery business initially. This goes back to decades ago, and has grown that into quite a thriving business that is now involved in multiple sectors of the economy. Of course, there's still a key focus on food through George Weston and specifically through Loblaws, but is increasingly involved in real estate and a number of other initiatives as well.
That's really interesting. So the one thing you were talking about was the Homegrown Innovation Challenge, and that sounds really exciting. Can you give us a little overview on the program and what the organization wants to accomplish through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Homegrown Innovation Challenge was launched last February, and it is a fairly significant initiative being undertaken by the foundation. We've earmarked $33 million to this initiative. And really, the goal is to bolster food sovereignty in Canada, specifically by enabling Canadian producers of fruits and vegetables to increase domestic market share. We want more of the fruits and vegetables that Canadians consume to come from Canadian farmers and producers. So that's ultimately our goal, and to reduce our reliance on imports. The challenge itself, the Homegrown Innovation Challenge, is really set up as a competition. And it states a very clear objective, and that is to create and deliver a market-ready system to reliably, sustainably, and competitively produce berries out of season and at scale in Canada. So in a large way, we don't really care how innovators achieve that, as long as they do. And as long as the systems that are developed through this challenge are really ready for prime time come 2028, 2029, that's when we're really seeking to move the needle around Canada's food sovereignty. So I can get into the structure of the initiative if you like, but it's not a short-term thing. This is going to be run over several years, and we're very serious about supporting innovators to truly to come up with practical solutions that meet the definitions laid out in the challenge statement.
Yeah, I think we should chat a little bit about the structure and the scale and scope, because it's very ambitious. The amount of capital being committed by the foundation, I think, will move the dial. Will help this industry innovate enough to overcome, our winter, basically, right? And our climatic challenges, which, we've done that. We're growing cucumbers and peppers and tomatoes and all kinds of great stuff, all across the country now. So that controlled environment agriculture, I think, will have a big piece to play here as well. Can you talk a little bit about the scale and scope, and then
Absolutely.
Maybe the first phase, which was the Spark Awards, just to give them a bit of a feel for the types of ideas that are coming forward, and hopefully will stimulate our audience to get excited about it and join up.
Yeah, with pleasure, Joe. So firstly, what I will just say, just in response to something you said, Joe, is that this is about extending the growing season for berries and ultimately for other fruits and vegetables. So we think there could be approaches that use traditional farming and outdoor growing practices. And we also think that the challenge statement, that extension of the growing season, can also be achieved using controlled environment solutions. So we're kind of agnostic as to the format of that production. To answer this question specifically, it's a 3-phase challenge that we've launched. Again, we launched it last February. The first phase of the challenge is called the Spark phase. The second is called the Shepherd phase, and the third is called the Scaling phase. And so the way it's structured is that in each of these phases, we provide funding, non-dilutive funding, to innovators to pursue their innovations, in keeping with the challenge statement that I articulated a few minutes ago. So in the Spark phase, we have provided $50,000 grants to 15 innovators from across Canada. And those funds are meant to support conceptualization, team building, the negotiation of contracts around intellectual property and such. So it's really a prelude, I would say, to the main challenge. And not only the Spark Awards are meant to be spent only over the course of 5 or 6 months. They were deployed in July and August of 2022. As we discussed just before we went into the recording session here, Joe, the rubber really hits the road in the Shepherd phase. The Shepherd phase, which is $1 million, which will be awarded to up to 10 innovators, supports small-scale proof of concept of these novel growing systems. So it's an 18-month phase, and we want to see innovators really do that heavy lifting around R&D to demonstrate to us that there is potential in their system to ultimately achieve those goals that are set out in the challenge statement. 2 important points about the Shepherd phase. The first is that you do not require Spark funding to apply to the Shepherd phase. So we expect that most of the innovators that received the Spark Award funding will apply, but by no means is it necessary. And I would say in many cases, the reviewers and the judges that are ascertaining the merit of an application won't even know if a team had received Spark funding or not. So no one should be too concerned about that if they didn't receive Spark funding. Second point I'd just like to make briefly about the Shepherd phase is that the deadline is close at hand. That deadline is December 20th, 2022. English language applications need to be submitted through our website, the homegrownchallenge.ca. French language applications can be emailed directly to us. All the instructions can also be found on the website, in this case, déficultivel'innovation.ca. So check that out if you're interested in the French site. But we need to receive those applications by December 20th, because after that point, there is no longer an entry point into the challenge. The door closes. And so all of that to say, if you want to receive scaling funding, and I'll come back to that point in a moment, you need to successfully acquire Shepherd funding. And to get that, you need to be into the challenge by December 20th. So moving to the third phase, that is the scaling phase. In that phase, which is about 2 years out from now, we're going to be awarding grants of up to $5 million to each of 4 innovators from the Shepherd pool. And that funding is really meant to allow innovators to scale up their innovations so they're ready for commercial launch. So we're really seeking farm scale systems by the end of this challenge. So that's a lot of money. So we're putting $20 million into that phase all told. So that's 4 grants of $5 million each. And again, to get that, you need to hold Shepherd funding. So if you successfully receive Shepherd funding, you have a 40% chance of getting scaling funding. And another way to put that is that if for a team that comes into the Shepherd phase right now and successfully navigates to the very end of the challenge, they would receive about $8 million in funding. So we had to take the $1 million from Shepherd. We have $5 million from the scaling phase, and then there was also awards at the end to recognize both the best overall solution and the most innovative solution.
Yeah, that sounds like a great project. You were saying that the Spark phase closed in July, August. Are you able to share any information about the innovations that you've seen coming out of that at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's been a lot of interest, and there was a lot of interest in the Spark Awards. We received a number of really interesting applications, and we did indeed end up picking 15 projects that received Spark funding. And again, that funding was deployed in the summer. Those projects are being run by really in a diversity of areas and by a diversity of innovators. We're funding projects across the country. They range from projects that are focused on novel environments to grow berries. For one example, is growing berries a mile underground in salt mines. Who knew that was possible? But apparently it is. Other projects are seeking very advanced kind of high-tech solutions to controlled environment agriculture using robotics, using artificial intelligence, advanced lighting systems. Others are focused more on the plant itself and manipulating plant genetics to enable more cold weather growing, for example. You'll see some projects in there focused on strawberries, others focused on raspberries, a few focused on blueberries. Of course, we have very few restrictions as to the berry crop that an innovator can select as really a demonstration crop. And certainly we'd love to see more diversity around the berry crop and the Shepherd applications moving forward. But some really interesting and compelling stuff there, I have to say. And for more information, if your listeners are interested, they can check out the website where we profile each and every one of those 15 Spark projects.
So you've got me really excited. I'm a berry farmer, and I want to get involved. What's that process? How how can I get a project pulled together and get it in for Shepherd? What are the elements I need? What are the steps? Can you guide me a little bit to focus on that over the next couple of weeks to pull something together that looks good?
Absolutely. So the first thing I will say is that as a private foundation, as a charitable entity, we are required by the federal government to only give grants to qualified donees, as that term is defined by the Canada Revenue Agency. There's a long list of organizations that meet the definition of qualified donees, but I think for the purpose of our discussion today, we can say they're largely academic institutions, they're municipalities, they're government groups, and they're registered charities. So those qualified donees need to be involved. Indeed, they need to lead the application and the project, as those are the entities that can receive direct funding from the Weston Family Foundation. So to answer your question specifically, Joe, if you are a farmer that wants to get involved, really the first step in most cases is to find a qualified donee with which to partner. So again,
you have some, let's just say, I could come to you and you'd say, all right, let's get you connected with the university or the college, or
absolutely,
or
absolutely,
you'd have some people that we could look in.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we have a few groups, a few qualified donees that are looking for commercial partners now.
Okay.
So those are there in the hopper. I mean, I would say we're a little bit light on involvement from producers, those farmers with real practical experience of growing these crops. So we want to have more involvement from those folks. And we've got some really interesting researchers, interesting companies with new technologies that are looking specifically to partner with producers and farmers. So if you are interested in that and you fall into that category, please reach out. The email address to reach the team here is challenge@westonfoundation.ca. And I think you'll find we'll be pretty responsive. That raises another point, and that is the way we're running this initiative is maybe a little bit unusual in the grant making world. As a team, we've structured this so that we can play a very proactive role in helping innovators, helping applicants to put their best foot forward. Our goal is to make sure we get the best possible applications by December 20th that we possibly can. So if you're looking for help in team building, if you're looking to discuss some of the concepts, you're just looking for more information on the challenge, please feel free to reach out. We're happy to set up a Zoom call or just answer your questions in writing. I mean, that's a really important part of what I do really on a day-to-day basis.
Terrific. Let's just say you're a donee, you're a university. Universities are pretty big. Can they be a donee more than once?
Yeah, that's actually a great question.
The engineering department and the plant science, you're never going to get them all working nicely together.
Yeah,
but they might have pieces of it here.
So. No, it's a fantastic question, Joe. So yes, I mean, as an institution, whether it's a qualified donee or whether it's a for-profit collaborator, you can be involved in as many applications and as many projects as you like. The only restriction we have is that the lead investigator, that would be the individual leading the project, can only lead one project.
Perfect.
But beyond that, that also doesn't mean that lead investigator can't be a co-applicant or a secondary investigator on other projects. So we're very flexible about how that works. Another thing you said, Joe, which just reminds me, it's an important point to make, is indeed we are seeking very multidisciplinary. We're seeking to build multidisciplinary teams and projects. So to your point, we want to have folks experienced in horticulture as well as engineering and physics and energy systems all come together. And indeed, we think that's what it's going to take ultimately to prevail in this challenge and to address this challenge statement for the benefit of Canada.
Very exciting.
You're saying that these projects would run until, what we say, 28, 29?
Yeah.
So is the ultimate goal to commercialize these ideas and then be able to produce these berries across or in Canada?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. The goal is to have a commercial product at the end of the day. So we also show a lot of flexibility around intellectual property and who can hold that intellectual property and benefit from these innovations commercially. But that's the idea. It's the idea to sell these berries and hopefully achieve some measure of price parity with foreign competitors such that we can increase that market share for our producers. Now, that's not to say that foreign entities can't be involved. They certainly can be. If you're a qualified donee in Canada and you want to partner with a foreign producer, you're very welcome to do that, particularly if it affords you some kind of technological advantage. The only requirement we have at the end of the day is when it comes to those berries, when it comes to, as we say, the food derived from the innovation, you need to put Canada and Canadians first. That's what this is about. It's about Canada. It's about Canadians. It's about our food sovereignty. We can't have a situation where a producer says, yeah, well, maybe we'll focus on overseas markets just because they're larger. We'll get to Canada eventually. We will put in mechanisms to prevent that kind of situation, as I think you can understand.
That's terrific. I want more information. There must be a website. Can you share that? We'll make sure it's linked in the podcast here.
Yeah, we sure do. So firstly, if you just want to learn just general information about the Weston Family Foundation, you can find that on westonfoundation.ca. The Homegrown Innovation Challenge has a purpose-built website. That's homegrownchallenge.ca. Of course, we're conducting this challenge in both of Canada's official languages. So you can find French language information on the website déficultiverlinnovation.ca. And we also are very active on Twitter. Not TikTok yet, Joe. I like you, but we are, at least we're on Twitter, and the Twitter handle is at HomegrownIC, and we will broadcast information both English and French on that channel. Last thing I'll say in terms of accessing information and getting in touch, challenge at westonfoundation.ca. Again, that comes to the entire internal team here working on this challenge, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff, for sharing that information. Before we head out, is there anything else you'd like our listeners to know about?
Yeah, two things in particular. I think the first is we're looking for bold, transformative ideas. And we're certainly, and I speak for the reviewers and the judges and the entire organization here, that we are not afraid of risk. We want risky, bold ideas. We're not overly concerned if they don't work out at the end of the day. So we think that's the role we should be playing. If we think that if you really want to address this problem and bolster the fortunes of Canadians for generations to come, it requires risk-taking. It requires really, a lot of kind of major transformation. So, as long as you have can demonstrate that there's some feasibility and there's a way to mitigate that risk associated with your idea, we want to hear it. We want to look at it. So we're not afraid of risk. The second point I just will come back to is time is short. We've got about a month coming up to the deadline for the Shepherd phase. And, we're looking to get as many great applications in by that time as we can. And there is a little bit of work required to write these applications. We kind of do hope that applicants will seek some advice from different entities and conduct some consultations. You need to put a financial model together to speak to the cost structure that you would realize by 2028, 2029 when you go to market. So there is some work required. So don't underestimate that. So if you're interested and you haven't got involved yet, feel free to reach out, whether it's around matchmaking or whether it's just for some guidance. We're happy to interact.
That's fabulous. Congratulations, and thank you for pulling this together and executing. I think it's great for the country. It's great for agriculture and innovation, and great for the producers, and consumers will get better quality berries and produce out of it too. So it's a real win-win. Thanks for joining us, Jeff, and it's been a pleasure chatting about this. we'll make sure that lots of people know about this event and encourage them to join.
Really appreciate it, Joe. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you and Michael today. And so thanks for having me on. And we're very excited to see what can come out of this. And we do think there's a lot of opportunity here in Canada. I think we can all agree on that. Now this is the opportunity to really realize the potential of that opportunity in this space.
Great. And I'd just like to thank our listeners for tuning into the Ready, Set, Grow podcast. And thank you again, Jeff, for joining us.